Welcome to another edition of Books and the World. Books and the World is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center. For over 40 years, Books and the World has showcased the contributions of writers, illustrators, publishers, and editors and their unique talents in the world of the media and literature. I'm here today with Katrin Schumann. Katrin is a writing instructor at Grub Street, one of the nation's most well-respected writing centers located in Boston, Massachusetts, as well as a writing instructor for the Penn prison writing system. She is an editor, and she's also the author of numerous nonfiction books, including one I'm dying to get my hands on, The Secret Power of Middle Children. Katrin is here with us today to talk about her debut novel, The Forgotten Hours, published by Lake Union Publishing and released earlier this year. It's the story of Katie Gregory, a woman in her early 20s whose life was derailed in her teens when her father, John Gregory, is accused of sexual assault by Katie's best friend, Lulu. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, I loved the story. The story is about something so relevant in today's society, in the Me Too society, but it's combined with the nostalgia of childhood and of teenage years, along with the complications of marriage and what it takes to create an adult relationship when you're still hanging on to a childhood past. I know that if you'd like to tell us a little bit about the book, I know Katie, who is the protagonist, is at a point where she should be having a wonderful life. She's finished with college, she has the job of her dreams, she's in a relationship, but she's also waiting moment to moment for the release of her father from prison, and that's where we break into the story. And it resonates in so many ways. I know that you had some experience with some friends that created the backdrop for this story. Can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. So what I was really interested in exploring with this story is what you mentioned, which is a young woman who is sort of on the cusp of her own freedom, and she's at a moment where she has to decide the kind of life that she wants to lead and the kind of life that she can lead. But as you mentioned, she's had this trauma in the past. And she grew up in a culture of silence in her family, where they were kind of like, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get on with life and don't dwell in the difficult things, which has allowed her to move forward. But she's really sort of damaged, and she hasn't had the courage to really examine what might have happened that night. And she clings to this sense of really deep loyalty for her father. And that's what I wanted to explore. That's the experience that I had, kind of, not exactly the same experience as the ones that I explore in this book, but I myself am somebody who's just a super loyal person. And I discovered at a certain point in my adult life that blind loyalty is not always a positive thing.
True.
And I became really fascinated with this idea that we kind of cling to this idea of ourselves as being these good, loyal citizens. And then we also cling, sometimes rather desperately, to our notion of what other people are like. And it can be really hard to admit to ourselves that we might be wrong about somebody, because it's hard to know anybody entirely.
Absolutely.
So that's the back and forth that I was looking to explore.
And especially in a parent-child relationship. That is in its own, unique circumstance, either a good or bad relationship, but it tends to seem that both of them create a sense of loyalty. Even if you've been in a bad parent-child relationship, there's a sense of loyalty to the parent. I know that there were a couple of people that you drew experiences from, which was on both sides of the the abuser and the person accused of being abused. And I know that you've spoken before in interviews about how these days that's a tricky scenario of being accused of something that perhaps you didn't do. So definitely your portrayal of Katie's father was so wonderfully drawn, with the ability to make us wonder the entire time where this was going. Was he guilty? Was he not guilty? Did we feel did we feel like he was true as a person? And I felt like with every bit of information that you were dropping out from the story, that you really did a good job of letting us know where you wanted us to be. You know, and that's a tricky thing to do as a writer.
Yeah.
So tell me about your choice of the back and forth timeline and your choice of perspective.
Sure. So with the dual storyline, I was committed to trying to make that work. It can be really challenging. And editors are kind of a little wary of that, because what can happen is that readers become more involved in one storyline or over another, or one storyline that just seems to be more compelling, and then readers get frustrated. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show from a very narrow perspective, from Katie's really the limited lens of her perspective, both when she's more mature at this age of 24, when she's had some experiences and learned a little bit about herself and is continuing to learn more about herself through her relationship with her adult relationship with this man Zev.
With Zev, yes.
But then how examining her past teaches her about how to move forward. So I wanted to also then take a little snapshot of the night that this alleged crime happens, and show you how, as a young girl, how we see things through the lens of our expectations and the moment. The whole world revolves around us. What we think is happening. So I wanted to dive into that and show you that it's a really very limited perspective.
Absolutely.
And we can't always know fully what's happened.
Well, and she seemed as a character, and I can certainly relate to that in many other ways, stuck in that time period. She had an unresolved relationship with her father. An unresolved, although I loved the relationship that you portrayed with Charlie, her mother.
Yeah.
Charlie was as complicated a character as there comes. You know, I love my children, I love my life, I've got a dark side, my dark side is my sorrow.
Yeah.
It kind of went back and forth with me, like I kind of wanted to choke her. You needed to open your eyes more, but then you could see why she wasn't opening her eyes more to whatever her children's needs are. And also it was summer. When you put a family together in a summer environment like that, where you've got where everything's a little more carefree, you're going to see different types of personalities coming out. But her unresolved relationships, even with her love interest of that summer, Jack. Katie was in love with a boy named Jack. And once the accusation happened, he disappeared from the planet, and she didn't know why. And so she was left kind of floating by many people. So
in the relationship with the mother, for me, in a way, the mother is the most tragic character in the book, because she's really misunderstood. And I wanted to look at how, for children, sometimes it's easier to stick with one parent and turn your back on another. And in Katie's case, she couldn't embrace her mother's choices and decisions after this trauma, this traumatic experience takes place. And so her poor mother is kind of relegated to the role of the enemy, when she isn't really capable of fully telling her children about the personal experiences that she's had.
She has half of a story that she can give, and that's all the story that they've already seen.
So the question there, fundamentally, is, how could the mother have done better? And I believe it's hard to, when you're thrown in these circumstances that are so challenging, you're doing the best you can. And in Charlie's case, she causes a lot of problems with her reaction.
But she also moves on with her life and tries to achieve happiness of her own, which is,
and for which she then is blamed
punished
in a way, because
Correct.
she does move on.
You know, that you can only be as happy as your least happy child. And then the relationship between Katie and her best friend. Now, because we're going back and forth in a time frame, and we're getting a little glimpse of the dynamics of adolescence, where there's one girl on top and one girl that feels more shy and less able to be the, the force that girls want to be in that adolescent age. Because we're going back and forth, and then we're also seeing, almost from an omniscient perspective, a little bit of Lulu's life, the best friend's life, like her backdrop, so that as an intelligent reader, you can kind of see that all is a little bit different than which was again, masterful the way that you kept us.
Thank you.
We were changing. I know I was changing allegiances.
Yeah.
All the time, and I was planning to dislike this one character for life, and then I saw a little bit more.
And then you discover a little tidbit.
Yes, exactly. Which was very well done. But to lose so many things in one felt swoop in a summer is an awful lot. And mostly, it seemed as though she lost her confidence in her ability to even judge, because she had a best friend.
Right.
And her best friend, she thought, was doing something.
Right. So she suffers two disappointments, really, in a way, and she's asked to make a choice in whether to believe her best friend, who is, in a way, they have such an intense, deep relationship. It's almost like a romantic relationship, but there's no sex involved.
Right.
But they're, many readers will have this experience, being sort of bonded at the hip with a best friend when you're growing up. So she has to choose between this girl who she kind of loves and trusts and admires, and her father, who's always been good to her. And we see that in many scenes. He's generous, he's funny, he's supportive, he makes her feel safe. He's more open than her mother is. Her mother tends to be a little bit withdrawn and quiet.
Well, he definitely lets you know who he is.
Yeah.
In any given situation.
Yeah.
He wants you to know who he is that
right.
day. Yes,
so part of the
and Lulu
drama,
and her father were alike in so many ways.
Bit,
I found that they had both were like, let me put this out there, let me, and so, and you could see why the character of Katie was drawn to both of them.
Yeah.
And
then her interest in Jack. So she's sort of coming into her own through that experience.
And at this time, she's 15, 16?
15.
15.
Yeah, so she's looking at, she and Lulu are kind of vying for Jack's attention that summer, and Katie's always thought of herself as the boring, quiet one, but Jack is interested in her.
Right.
And so she's emerging from this shell,
it's this beginning of a power.
But she feels guilty about it, because it's a competition between her friend and her, and her friend, Lulu, clearly believes that she's the more charismatic and interesting one, and she trusts that Jack will be interested in her. So that's a conflict.
And to have this all going on while we're watching her adult life somewhat unravel.
Yeah.
Because the unraveling, knowing that her father is coming home from prison, knowing that he has expectations of what he wants her to do when he comes home from prison. And he wants to just jump right back into, this is what I want in my life, and you're my daughter, and please do it. That was hard for me, because I did want to go to prison and slap him a bit, So there was that was kind of a lot of the beginning of, oh my goodness, let's talk about this relationship. What is this relationship? And I know in the very beginning, I think I read an interview where you had said that you had initially had a different title for the novel, and it was a working title, and then they chose The Forgotten Hours, and part of the reason was because the first title, which was
The Liar's Paradox,
right, and you didn't
which is an actual thing, and I love that title.
So what is The Liar's Paradox?
Well, The Liar's Paradox is basically a conundrum about what is the truth. Like, this sentence is a lie, for example. If this sentence is a lie, I mean, that's an infinite circle of uncertainty.
Right.
And what I liked about the Liar's Paradox, the concept of the Liar's Paradox, is that it gets at this idea that it's hard to know the truth.
Right.
And facts and the truth are not the same, and you can have the facts but not the truth. However, my publisher felt that it signaled sort of more of a genre,
exactly.
like a thriller.
Well, you said that you were worried about it being a thriller, and yet when I look at this novel, it is part, for me, it's part psychological thriller. It's part almost memoirish. It has a lot of meat to it in the contemporary literary fiction aspect. So I feel like it had so many things. I love the title, The Forgotten Hours, and I love it on a personal level because, and that's probably what drew me to this book immediately, is like so many women, I had that one moment of uncomfortableness in middle school that literally made me forget a year of middle school. And you can see how your whole trajectory of your adulthood can be altered by a moment, and whether that moment is as the victim or the person who thinks she's a victim even sometimes, or the family of the accused, it alters everybody's moment.
And The Forgotten Hours kind of gets at the layering.
Yes.
They're trying to remember, trying to piece together a story. We don't always remember or see things clearly.
Exactly.
And so I think in that sense, The Forgotten Hours reflects a little bit better kind of the thematic elements of the book.
Right,
maybe?
absolutely. Well, and that was another thing I wanted to know is how difficult was it to make a segue from writing nonfiction to going to say, hey, I've got all the options open.
Yes.
I can actually take anything I want and use it in my...
I do find nonfiction much easier to
Yeah.
write than fiction because you do have this infinity of choices.
Right.
And that can be...
Well, and nonfiction is the math of writing, I think,
yeah.
because there is an answer.
That's right.
You research
and you
hard
can
enough,
kind
you're
of
going to find
plan
it.
it out
Yes.
in a way. I don't
Yes.
plan my books in the same way.
Oh, I was going to ask you about planning.
Yeah, I'm really very much motivated by setting and by character, and plot is secondary. You have to have a good and interesting plot to keep the readers reading.
But the characters
But
drive
the characters
story.
drive the story for me,
Yes.
definitely. Whereas in nonfiction, I'm thinking much more overtly about the reader and what the reader needs to know.
Did you have an ending for this book? Did you have a different ending for this book? Did you know exactly where this was going?
Well, I had a couple of different versions of the book, and in one of my first drafts, the father was already dead in the present-day storyline.
Kind of would have made it harder and easier.
Yeah, I think part of that was that I didn't really want to face him and
Yes.
fully explore him yet, or I wasn't ready as a writer to go there yet.
Right.
And then in my final draft, I changed that present-day storyline to pull it forward more and make the main character younger. And so he's present in that storyline.
Yeah. I was also interested in her relationship with her brother, which, and I want to tell you I remember every aspect of this book because I really do love it, but I wish that we were sitting here today with 30 other women and we could just get right down into it, and everyone that's read it already knows the answer so that we could really get to the meat of it.
The heart of it.
It's hard to talk about this story without giving away a plot piece that's important to the reader to actually get organically. And but I was interested in the relationship with her brother because they were kind of separated. I mean, she sort of goes off to college shortly after the the trial, and then he's finishing his growing up years, and he doesn't seem as affected.
Yeah, he's much younger when this happens. So part of what I was looking at there is the effect that kind of traumatic experience can have on you depending on what age you're at.
Oh, okay.
And she was just at this moment, this sort of pivotal moment.
Right.
Where, and that's why I chose to place it at in this idyllic lakeside community where this happens. Because for her in that moment, everything seems possible. Like the world is full of opportunity. She's fallen in love for the first time. It's very exciting, it's very romantic. And when something really terrible happens at a moment like that, when you're so open to the world, it can really set you off track. Whereas her brother is much younger. And so there's a lot that he doesn't see and doesn't understand.
And he takes it more matter-of-factly, just because if this is his life. He's, for all of his, or a lot of his years, his life was that his parents were not living together.
That's
and
right.
That, and he had a stepfather per se, right?
Yeah. And he's not as deeply involved because in Katie's case, of course, the drama is around her best friend, and she feels in an odd way responsible for what happens, or she, in her heart, she questions whether maybe her behavior that night could have led to what happened in the end.
Right.
And her brother's not involved as deeply in that way, so he doesn't carry the shame and the doubt with him in the same way that she does.
You had said that your first draft, so when did you begin this novel?
So I started writing it maybe about 5 years ago, and it did take quite some work figuring out how to tell the story, the dual timeline, but also that present-day timeline. So it was easier for me to write the past timeline.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there was something sort of fun about setting it in that kind of environment and exploring the relationship between these two girls. Whereas the present-day storyline presented more difficulties. She has all these choices that she has to make, whether she wants to stay with her boyfriend, whether she can trust him and trust herself, how she's going to react to her father getting out of prison. Is she going to do the things that her father's asking her to do, like go back to the cabin that she hasn't been to for 10 years after all this time, and kind of face the things that she
And he wasn't
hasn't
asking her to
been
face it.
able.
He wasn't interested in her facing it per se. That was just on her journey. That would be part of going back to the cabin.
She discovers really that she can't go forward with her own life until she has faced it.
Right.
And I think that's I think that's true for many people. You know, you can't sweep
Right.
things under the rug.
No,
They don't
exactly.
go away.
Exactly.
There's going to
They
be a lump
pile
under
up.
the
There's a
rug.
lump under the rug, and it gets so
Yeah.
big you can't open the door.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. In fact, I saw that you did a great job of that with her relationship with Zev. And I was also completely interested in the fact that you did make him an older character, which I clearly can see the reason why. And then and even her ancillary best friend, you know, that you could tell that her relationship was take it or leave it. You know, when she was going out to a club or going out, it was kind of like she had so much going on that she could not invest herself in one more relationship, even relationships that counted deeply to her.
Yeah. Well, she's sort of protecting herself.
Exactly.
You know, when you've been, when you've really suffered, and when you're not sure anymore about whether you can trust your instincts and who's real and who's not real and who can you trust, you know, she has these defense mechanisms, and it's hard to get close to her. And Zev manages to break through his personality.
And he does it kind of unconsciously. It's not like he's prying.
Yeah.
He simply is not pushing almost.
He allows her to be herself.
Yes, yes.
And that allows her to mature and grow into herself, but she's still not confident about her path forward.
Absolutely.
And so it's a pivotal moment for her, then making these decisions about how to move ahead with her life.
Wow. Because you're an editor, was it really difficult for you to hand over your baby to somebody and say, here, tell me what you think, edit this for me?
Yeah.
Because I would be like, no.
Yeah. You know, that's an interesting question, because initially, when the book was in early drafts, it was really challenging to get feedback on it. And it wasn't really working. And I knew it wasn't quite working. And I was very sensitive
you
about
needed
the book.
something for advice and for...
Yeah, and I, you know, at that point you need encouragement, but you also need somebody you trust who can say, look, this isn't working for whatever
who's not
reason.
just patting you on the back and saying yes.
So I was always very open. I knew I needed some help and direction. And in those early days, it was hard to get it right, but I was willing to work at it.
Right.
Then at the point where I had the professional editor, you know, when I had already sold the book, it was pretty sharp and tight at that point. It really didn't need a whole lot of editing.
By then. Yeah, you had
but
done
I
a
had
lot
done
of work on it.
plenty of hard work for a long time before that point.
Right. Did you have to? Did you find yourself going back to rearrange the timeline per se? You know, how many scenes from the past? How many scenes
I did that before selling the book.
You did.
I mean, I really did a lot of work on getting it right before the book sold.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of indicative of the marketplace nowadays. You know,
Right.
it's
They
hard
want
to
a
sell something.
finished piece.
Yeah, that still is a little.
It's kind of
wonky.
funny, you know, and nobody's taking you by the hand and saying, "Oh, this was beautiful. Now let me do everything you need."
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, why don't you tell me a little bit about your publishing process?
Well, it's been fantastic so far.
And it's Union Lake.
Lake Union.
Lake Union, thank you.
The process up to finding the publisher was just this absolute roller coaster ride. Okay. I had lots of agents who were interested in the book, and it seemed, and this was before the whole Me Too conversation.
Right, if you put that out right now, yes.
I had a lot of interest initially, and then I think publishers were leery of the book.
Oh, really?
They were afraid of, you know, I ask readers to go on a kind of a difficult journey.
No, it's not
they
easy,
have to
and yet it's riveting.
Be patient with this main character who is a reluctant truth seeker, and they have to be willing to accept that things aren't black and white.
Exactly.
And to live in that uncomfortable space.
Exactly.
So then when Lake Union expressed interest in it, it was exciting from that moment onwards. I mean, I was just so happy that it was going to be out in the world.
Absolutely.
And what then was the next challenge was when the book is published and you start to get all this feedback. And so I'm somebody who doesn't read my reviews.
Oh, so have you never read a...
I did on the first day.
Let me tell you, I didn't read any bad reviews. I read very nice, encouraging, wonderful, and pairing you with, you know, Jodi Picoult and other authors who have some real standing and... I did not read. If there is a bad review and you had to read it, I feel terrible that you had to have that moment.
Well, the first day the book came out, I have to admit, I couldn't resist. And people read quickly, and they review quickly. And I read some lukewarm reviews, and it just was like a knife into my heart. And I realized it's not for me. I can't read the bad reviews. And at that point, I have already thought every every criticism that you could have of this
Right,
book
it
I have
already
has already gone through my mind, so I'm not really
Exactly.
going to learn anything from
Exactly.
it. But I can tell you that reading the good reviews and having getting emails from readers has been such an extraordinary experience, and meeting readers in real life,
Isn't that...
at book events and book clubs. And
Tell me
people
where
who
you
are,
can get your book. Tell me how it's available to the reader.
Yeah, so the best way for people to get it is to go online and to go on Amazon, or to
Okay.
go to my website actually first is probably good, because
Okay.
there are links on my website, which is just katrinschumann.com.
Perfect.
There are links on there that will take you to where you can purchase the book. And you can get it in hardcover or paperback or Kindle.
Is it available on
Audible.
audio yet?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, it is.
goodness. And did you narrate it yourself?
I did not. It would have been fun, but
Yeah.
I didn't. Yeah, maybe the next one.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy that we've had this time to discuss this, because I do have a book club, and I'm dying to go ahead and experience this with other women.
Well, I'm happy to
and I know
Skype
that there are
in.
men that are probably going, oh, that would be wonderful. I know there.
I have had emails from men too who've read
Yes.
the book and been moved. So
Oh no, I'm
it's interesting.
sure. I'm sure from a man's perspective, I know sometimes to have a narrative about a female protagonist in their 20s isn't maybe something that they want to, but I'm sure that from a men's perspective, it's an incredibly interesting read too. And I thank you so much for joining us today. This was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
This was another episode of Books and the World, and we were so thrilled today to have author, I always want to say it wrong, but Katrin Schumann, and her beautiful, beautiful novel, a debut novel that is well worth the read for anyone who loves not just to delve into a novel, but to delve into a good discussion afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
This was great. Thanks.